This week's episode is brought to you by Dr. David Knight, Emma Alsop, and Shinda Shima. Thank you, Dr. Knight, Emma Alsop, and Shinda Shima. It's with the generous support of listeners like you that we get to keep oozing the contents of our brain into the cosmic waffle iron, wherefore thou art served stack after steamy stack of secret syrup-soaked noggin cakes to cure your reality hangover each week. If you'd like to join us at the table, please visit www.patreon.com, where your monthly donation of just $5 gets you convenient access to all our extended shows in RSS feed format, compatible with your podcast app of choice. I'll even send you a 5x5 vinyl sticker of our cover art with no additional cost from you, and give you mid-level security clearance access to our Discord channel, where our continued efforts at global hegemony are being triangulated in real time. This week sees us finish up the second half of Book 2 of Liber Al Legis, the Book of the Law, penned by Aleister Crowley in 1912, the primary holy text of the esoteric religion of Thelema. To follow the entire conversation thread, begin with Thelema without cute hats, and continue with our Fool's Guide to the Book of the Law episodes in order beginning with Book 1. We pick up this week with line 22, which emphasizes how indulgence can act as a path to divinity. In the free show, we get deep into the philosophical heart of Book 2, which is the important part because it mentions all the important stuff at least once. In the second half of the show, we dive into the deeper parts of Book 2's metaphors, where both ostriches and dogs fit into the bigger picture. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Yeah, you have to overcome all these veils.
Yeah.
All these hurdles on your way to discussing the law of the book.
Must focus.
That's why you have to burn it after studying it. For God's sake, don't tell anyone about it.
But I want to become popular on the internet.
Become a Thelemite.
The meme-amite.
Thelememes?
Do will be law.
Much wow.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory, but stir the hearts of 400 bunnies with drunkenness. Nay, we trample on the weak in the fierce lust of our pride in the day of our wrath, because this week we're discussing the second half of Book 2 of Thelema's holy text, Liber Al Legis, the Book of the Law. I'm your host, Hack Rabbit. I'm joined this week by co-hosts, the Crystal Queen Corgi of Chaos, Mari Sama.
Awoo!
The Mad Missionary of Mantu, Malachor 5. That's how you know you're getting messed up in a Souls game. The Incendiary Strawberry Barbello, Heka Astra.
Hello.
Breaking the Book of the Law in two halves, specifically Book 2, turned out to be a great idea because we get to start on line 22, and it's starting to feel like all the esoteric spiritual movements that followed in the later half of the 20th century, Satanism, chaos magic, even the New Age, seem to lift a lot of philosophy from Book 2. As someone who started their occult studies with Anton LaVey, it seems the philosophy proclaimed here in line 22 is a brief summary of what would later become some of Satanism's biggest selling points. This can be said of quite a few verses in Book 2, but line 22 stands out in spectacular fashion.
Line 22. I am the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory, and stir the hearts of men with drunkenness. To worship me, take wine and strange drugs, whereof I will tell my prophet, and be drunk thereof. They shall not harm ye at all. It is a lie. This folly against self. The exposure of innocence is a lie. Be strong, O man. Lust. Enjoy all things of sense and rapture. Fear not that any god shall deny thee for this.
There's a lot to unpack here. As he states in his 1912 comment, Hadit now identifies himself with the Kundalini, the central magic force in man. This concept was explored in some depth, using a whole bunch of Kabbalistic and tarot symbolism in the lines that preceded this one. Specifically, Hadit proclaims that while fools perceive him as 9, he's more accurately 8, and 1 in 8. What does this mean? Without rehashing our last episode too much, we can say that Hadit is calling his audience to contemplate how the foolish perceive divinity to be more in alignment with the cosmic principles being expressed in the Hermit card of the tarot, the 9th major arcana, while in the future, divinity will be rightly associated with the cosmic principles expressed in justice, the 8th major arcana card of the tarot. How so? The Hermit, or 9, in his association with the earth sign Virgo, is known for his purity, solitude, eliteness, retreating, releasing, independence, perfection, virginity, and permanence. He corresponds with the idea of an absolute, an unchanging ideal ruled by the word. Justice, or 8, in her association with the air sign Libra, is known for her balance, union, equanimity, responsiveness, interdependence, seeking, binding, and dynamism. She corresponds with the idea of dynamic equilibrium ruled by love. So where the Hermit is perennial homeostasis, Justice is eternal dynamic equilibrium. In terms of the esoteric, it's the difference between the earthly seed and the intangible principles which operate inside of the seed itself. Even more concretely, it's the difference between the subtle, etheric Kundalini and its physical, earthly expression as the sex and sex fluids.
Like, much like the 8 itself, like the symbol of infinity, it continues on and on. Like, there's this recycling and this balance that happens, but it's constantly dynamic.
So rather than finding God through the purification of our physical vessel, we're called to seek divinity by stirring the subtle energies of life within, even through the use of sensorial indulgence. And that will not make us lose any brownie points with God for doing so. Crowley states of this in his old comment,
This privilege of using wine and strange drugs has been confirmed. The drugs were indeed revealed. Follows a curse against the cringing altruism of Christianity, the yielding of the self to external impressions, the smothering of the babe of bliss beneath the flabby old nurse convention.
flabby old nurse convention.
Wow.
Squishing babies of joy.
In a later comment, he quotes, drunkenness is a curse and a hindrance only to slaves. Shelley's couriers were drunk on the wind of their own speed. Anyone who is doing his true will is drunk with the delight of life.
So to me, it's like, do whatever helps this realization and become closer to God.
Kind of living in the moment kind of thing, and that learning from experience rather than, oh, you shouldn't do that because so-and-so did it once and it was not a good thing. It's like, you don't really know that until you confirm it yourself.
A pretty easy example of this is the spiritual kind of experience that you can have with hallucinogenic substances, whether it's ayahuasca or LSD, you know?
Yeah, because each individual has a different experience. There's no way to, like, telling someone else not to do it because you had a bad trip is probably not a good idea. Like, this is advice to ignore that kind of advice.
I think even a yogi will tell you, well, like if you felt like you were in meditation while you were tripping on whatever, he'd probably encourage you to do it again if that's what it took to get you into like a meditative state.
And to be fair, if you look at any religion or mystical tradition, there's almost a ubiquitous use of some sacrament. Even the Mormons have like their Mormon tea, which is kind of like an amphetamine drink.
They get high on their special underwear.
Because he's pointing out that these are not evil things and that the perception of godliness as being synonymous with abstaining and innocence is a byproduct of the Christian line of thought or the old ways of thinking. It's stated in the words, the exposure of innocence is a lie. Because God is all, not just what the biased individual might perceive as being goodly or godly. So this tears down the idea that, you know, drugs are bad, okay? Anything that brings you to that joy and union in love cannot be evil or impure. Crowley then points out in his commentary that those who become slaves to these things and abuse them as escapism are just as damned for the dogs as the Christians. And at one point he states that they're better off dead.
So don't be a junkie. Because when you're a junkie, they're not strange drugs. They're familiar
habitual.
and needed. Yeah.
You become a slave to it.
Rather than you using it as a tool.
Even in Satanism, you're encouraged to stop all forms of automatic poisoning or compulsory poisoning. Like, oh, I have to drink this beer every day. Like me when I smoke, that would be a no-no.
Well, is it becoming a replacement for bonding? You know, has it gotten to a point where it's replacing the experience of bonding or joy? Because if it is, then you're better off dead. You're damned for dogs.
I take offense to that.
Well, we're going to get into that.
All dogs go to heaven.
So while the hermit always has to be pure, we say now in this aeon, the exposure of innocence is a lie. This means, fundamentally, there's no such thing as damaged goods. It's not a thing. There's also no original sin to work off.
And honestly, like taking traumatic experiences that you had growing up or even in your adult life, the key to healing those things, not only confronting it, but turning it around and making it the silver lining on the storm cloud, is you have to see the positive in the experience you went through. And what can you do with that? It doesn't damn you to be unclean or unworthy. You can turn it around and use it to inspire yourself to do more or help people.
Some of the commentary suggests that the exposure of innocence being a lie has to do with boasting of one's innocence or attempting to use one's innocence as a shield. Interestingly, in the Gospels of Thomas, a similar sentiment is reflected. Stanza 14. Jesus said to them, "If you fast, you'll bring sin upon yourselves. And if you pray, you will be condemned. If you give to charity, you will harm your spirits. When you go into any region and walk about in the countryside, when people take you in, eat what they serve you and heal the sick among them. After all, what goes into your mouth will not defile you. Rather, it's what comes out of your mouth that will defile you." I thought it was interesting that mouth, meaning earth, like consuming earth, is not what will defile you, like the Hermit, Virgo, and then what comes out of your mouth, air, justice, Mercury, will defile you.
That's cool.
So he had the new aeon woven into even his wisdom. Like, we used to be guilty about what our ancestors ate, but now we're guilty because of how they thought and spoke. Jesus saw all this change coming.
I mean, Nuit says, "But always in the love of me, and so shall ye come to my joy." The lust is not directed at simply the sensory pleasures of the five senses, but having our five senses be in reciprocal service and harmony of our true will, which ultimately is of the ecstasy and lust for Nuit. So we can experience our true will through our senses and act upon it with them. Those who are following their true will don't restrict themselves with the polarities of abstaining from these pleasures, but they're also not bound to them. That whole "they shall not harm ye at all" and "no God shall deny thee for this" ties right in. I also think, since this is line 22, I thought I'd mention how it combines really well with the 22nd ideal of the Egyptian goddess Ma'at that we spoke of last episode. And the 22nd ideal is, "I have not closed my ears to truth."
Wow.
I don't know if actually, did we talk about Ma'at last episode? I don't remember.
Well,
Anyways.
Ma'at is related to justice and to the 8, because in that tarot card, it's the same office position that Ma'at holds, and holding the scales, which Ma'at sits atop of in the weighing of the heart ceremony in the afterlife, in the duat.
I just can't remember if we talked about this in private conversation or if it was in recording.
It's one of the feathers of Ma'at that's weighed against the heart of the deceased, correct?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So Ma'at is truth, order, and love, like Luke said, related to justice. The love that she's related to is true divine love. It's why your heart is weighed against her feather. And I think people tend to think of the ideals of Ma'at as being the same thing as Christian commandments, like the 10 commandments, but that's not correct at all. The commandments are inspired by them. They're copied, tweaked, and they removed all the ones that could be even slightly perceived as supporting what Christians designated as evil. A huge example that always comes to mind is that negative confession, "I have not been angry or wrathful without just cause." Sekhmet's bloodlust for the destruction of humans was because humans weren't following the ideals of Ma'at, which is truth and order. But that is rooted in divine love and the heart. So the scales of Ma'at basically just weighs how much you followed your true will, or at least tried to. And I believe this idea of a kind of virginal abstinence from pleasures is 100% related to the fall of Babylon, the desecration, distortion, and perversion of the divine feminine. We know that the divine feminine was kind of copy pasted and then cut, trimmed down, veiled, and distorted until we ended up with the Virgin Mary and a polarized concept of purity. So I think it's also relevant to point out the symbolism of Ma'at, the Egyptian goddess of justice, as being represented by the feather as seen in her headdress, in hieroglyphs, and as a standalone symbol in art. And the feather is a reference to heavenly aspects and also air. Likewise, in a tarot, justice is ruled by Libra, which, besides being a pair of scales, like the ones Ma'at uses, is an air sign. Furthermore, as divine goddess Ma'at rules over justice, so too does Venus rule over Libra, indicating that the governing principle of this power is love. Ma'at's feather is a single ostrich plume, and ostriches can't fly. because they're earthbound birds. I believe this symbolizes how justice is not ruled by Mercury or logic like the earth is, but rather an irrational quality like love. Also, the ostrich isn't really hiding its head in the sand. It's turning its fucking egg.
The exposure of innocence is a lie.
Oddly enough, too, that scales turned into feathers after quite a bit of evolution. So they are practically the same thing. And then you weigh the feather on the scales. Wonder why they call that scales.
Oh, weird. So after Heck had directed my attention towards the ostrich, I noticed that the ostrich functions similarly to how the ox goad of Lamed corresponds to justice in the tarot, but we see this object manifest in the next card, the Hermit, as an earthly manifestation of the non-physical principle. Classically, the ostrich appears to hide its head to retreat from the world, not unlike the Hermit. In some sense, both are covering their innocence, specifically their seed, in both examples. While the Hermit withdraws from society to protect his seed, the ostrich withdraws from the world to protect its eggs. Both are a bit of a contradiction as well. If the Hermit can't and won't use his seed, why does he need to protect and purify it? Why can't the world's largest bird fly? They're both versions in that sense.
In alchemy, air is related to the mind and is touched by both sulfur and mercury. And that harkens back to what was said above about virginal purity, denying pleasure of the senses and all that. So what planet rules Virgo? Mercury. What element is associated with Virgo? Earth. I don't think it's at all a simple coincidence that Ma'at, who represents this receptivity to truth and love, is represented by the ostrich, an earthbound bird who is ultimately an aspect of divinity that became distorted, cut down, and veiled as virginal purity, ultimately being synonymous with abstaining and denying pleasure, joy, and divine union through any route that's deemed not pure.
So this whole idea of being encouraged to fill oneself with this fiery love of life and direct it in your ritual, this was like a major selling point of Satanism in the 60s and so on and so forth, even in chaos magic. It's almost a ubiquitous thing about these new spiritualities. But, this is this traditional Thelemic idea here, where they got it from. Which brings us to line 23. I am alone. There is no God where I am. What a communist.
Damn commies.
Crowley explains this line. The atheism of God. Allah is the atheist. He has no Allah. To admit God is to look up to God. And so to not be God, the curse of duality.
I really read this too like I am alone because there is no God where I am. I think that speaks to the perception of separation, lack of union. And this also relates back to the fool. Because to the fools, he is 9, simply perceived as a hermit, a separated manifestation of an earthly being. To the fools, Hadit is separate, alone, in solitude. Without the union of Hadit and Nuit, there is only separation. We know that. And Nuit said in chapter 1, there is no other God than me and my Lord Hadit. So there is no God where I am.
That's right on brand with Book of the Law reading like hip-hop lyrics, too. This is why so many rappers got Lil in their name.
Line 24. Behold, these be grave mysteries, for they are also of my friends who be hermits. Now think not to find them in the forest or on the mountain, but in beds of purple, caressed by magnificent beasts of women, with large limbs, and fire and light in their eyes, and masses of flaming hair about them. There shall ye find them. Ye shall see them at rule, at victorious armies, at all the joy, and there shall be in them a joy 1,000,000 times greater than this. Beware lest any force another, king against king. Love one another with burning hearts. On the low men trample in the fierce lust of your pride in the day of your wrath. I love Crowley's writing, man. Well, I guess this is a transmission here.
It's a really audacious thing to have in a holy book. As Ben Kiss would say, it's kind of fun.
So I think, again, this line pertains back to what we were just talking about, that the idea of a hermit as being one who is solely physically isolated, that's all being disassembled in this line. And for me, the women with large limbs is a direct connection to women that embody Nuit. Nuit is huge. Nut in Egyptian art is massive compared to Geb. Always. Nuit is always like the largest limbed woman.
A giant woman.
So yeah, and the same for the references for fire in their eyes and the flaming hair. I think that's applicable as the stars burning in her body. And it's also like saying, I carry the brilliance of our love with me wherever I go. Like the hermit carries that with him.
Yeah, you said, the idea of the hermit being disassembled in this line, it's not somebody who's actually, like you said, on a mountain or in the forest, but somebody whose magical art is in the bedroom pretty much with these, Dark Souls bosses for your women in bed with you, like,
Oh man.
yeah. I mean, that's pretty much what he's saying. Like the hermit in a magical sense is somebody who could still be out in the normal world, but you don't know anything about what's going on at the ritual times.
Like at the spiritual level.
Yeah, in the mind even, like deep in there.
So a Thelemic hermit, his lover is the body of God and the universe. Whether his lover is a person in that moment or God or his car or whatever.
Right, because this is still on the train of thought with Kundalini. This is just a couple lines after he's talking about that. So
Also,
it's like, it's like sex with the divine from the earthly heart.
Ah, yeah.
Also, in reference to the fire and light in their eyes, the Eye of Ra, the sun god, he's represented with a feminine deity or several, depending. So typically it's Wadjet, but the Eye of Ra is also recognized as an aspect of Hathor, Nath, or Mut. They're all feminine deities.
Ra's got mad bitches.
We've talked about Sekhmet on the show before, and she's also known as the Lady of the Flame, which once again is significant throughout this verse as the flaming hair, the flame of love. And that also the goddess Sekhmet is the fierce protector of Ra and Ma'at, truth. So yeah, these hermits you will find in the bed of the divine feminine in union with Nuit. Purple is also a color of royalty, even in Egypt, because you have to have blue and red in order to combine them to make purple. So the bed of a king or royalty is one that's of union with Nuit, regardless of whether one is physically alone or not. The hermit carries with him the love and union of Nuit.
Oh, interesting, because in the chakra system, the blue is the throat chakra, which is your voice and your will. It's your will spoken out loud, you being authentic. And then the red is your root chakra, your sexual and instinctual organs.
Kabbalah, purple is for Yesod. That sphere is associated with your groin area or your sexual organs. Also the moon.
Yeah, it means moon, which is also the feminine water principle. So there is an emotional aspect to it.
Eshelman swore up, down, left ways, and sideways that purple was referring to Chesed. I thought Chesed was like blue and Yesod was more purple.
There's also the part of this line that says, beware lest any force another king against king. I think this is stating that when one acts according to one's true will, that true will can't be forced upon another's true will. And in such a scenario as if it were king against king, if one fails to acknowledge the true will of agape, then that's bad.
That one getting trampled.
Yeah. So yeah, if force is used in an attempt to alter another's true will to match their own, then that is not true will, typically. For those that stand in the way of your ability to follow your true will, which is love, your true will always be love, you are justified in the wrath and pride of trampling said obstacles that would seek to divide you or refuse you your truth. So again, Sekhmet is justified in her wrath.
Would you call that tough love?
Without going into too many details, let's just say there are instances where being a wrathful motherfucker, it's valid. I'm not going to tell you what those are. That's probably different for each person, and it's relative and all those things. So don't bring this up in court.
Oh, no.
I think that's kind of the point. True will is relative to the individual.
Now, some of you might be saying to yourselves,
that sounds kind of problematic.
and to be fair, this really also bothered Crowley when he first read it, and it took him some explaining to himself what it really meant. In his comment, he says, "But who are the low men? Since every man and every woman is a star. The casus belli is this. There are people who are veiled from themselves so deeply that they resent the bared faces of us others. We are fighting to free them, to make them masters like ourselves." Cue Rage Against the Machine. Note verse 60. To hell with them. That is, let us drive them to the hell or secret sanctuary within their consciousness. There dwells the worm that dieth not and the fire that is not quenched. That is, the secret serpent coiled about to spring, and the flame that burns in every heart of man. Hadit. In other words, we take up arms against falsehood. We cannot help it if that falsehood forces the king it has imprisoned to assent to its edicts, even to believe that its interests are those of its oppressor, and to fear truth as once Jehovah did the serpent. You know how some people say you don't have to protect the truth? You gotta run from the truth. The truth comes out like a lion. That's kind of like what he's saying, I think.
Or maybe in the story of Adam and Eve, maybe we were set up to eat the apple.
Look,
It was all supposed to happen.
listen, if Jesus knew everything that was going to happen, he had to know that we ate the apple. Otherwise, he couldn't come and give himself to us on the cross and pay off the debt. No apple, no Jesus. See the connection
I
here?
mean, it's a setup, man.
No Jesus Band-Aid.
Maybe that's why Serpent and Messiah have the same Gematria value in Hebrew.
If you don't have a Jesus, you can't put on the Jesus Band-Aid.
I always tell people, they ask me, well, what's your favorite part of the Bible? And I'm like, well, it's the fact that Messiah and Serpent equal the same value.
It was the snake cosplaying as a human.
But if he didn't do it, no Jesus, no 9-inch nails, no terrible lie.
No rage against the machine.
None of it.
Because there was no machine.
Upon which to rage against.
No System of a Down. Which brings us to 25. Ye are against the people, O my chosen. There are a new type of hermit, Crowley says. Our ascetics enjoy, govern, conquer, love, and are not to quarrel. But when they do, even their combat is glorious.
For me, this is the notion of what is right for one is right for all. That whole notion as a collective is absurd absolutism.
Goddamn commies.
To forcefully apply such a generalization is dictatorship. To each their own, and rightly so. Herd mentality is counterproductive in this way. We're not sheep. Experiences are relative to the experiencer. So likewise, there is no concept of greater good that could be applied en masse that wouldn't in and of itself be restrictive to true will.
Yeah, it's like one size fits all does not work on this level. I think it's at the point of not only societies, but civilizations, or even the entire species. You cannot have hard, fast rules. Everything is going to change depending on the situation and the individual that is experiencing it.
And Crowley says, whatever society you're embedded in is going to want to push you and pull you one way or the other, but you have to be aligned with your higher self. And so naturally, that's going to make you against those currents. So don't be surprised.
He makes a point, too, in his commentary to point out that it's really easy to justify pushing one ideal over another. And that's what will happen because people do that. People tend to align with something and push what they value onto others.
Yeah, we tend to polarize. We're dualistic in nature.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, in order to pursue your true will and to have that union that we were talking about, that can only occur when you are open-minded enough to understand the opposite side of the way that you're pushing. Like, you have to understand the holistic implication of what you're doing.
Yeah, this line is pointing out the absurdity in absolutism.
Yeah, which I totally agree with.
And even Christianity, an old Aeon religion that we love to poke fun of on this show, they even know from the beginning that they would be persecuted against what the people wanted.
But now we have all these different sects and we have fundamentalism. It's completely different now than it was when Christianity was a cult.
But they don't really believe in collective salvation, is my point. Even
No,
they themselves.
They have their own, like, if you look at Eastern Orthodox, they don't have a pope. Each individual priest of a certain church, they have the last word on what is gospel. And there's no, like, looking up to higher authorities or any of this, like, man-made structure involved. And if you don't like that church, you go to the next church or you go home and pray by yourself. Like, there's no, like, oh, you have to do it this way. So there's not really much fundamentalism going on in the East versus the West if you're talking about Christianity, which I find interesting.
Yeah, a lot of the point of being silent, the whole idea of silence in Kabbalah, it's kind of like an echo of pretty much external validation doesn't matter for jack shit in this world.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be true if you are a spiritual seeker, if you are a member of a religion, or walking to the beat of your own drum, you're necessarily going to be a little bit against the people, almost no matter what.
Right. Going against the grain.
It just comes with the territory.
Line 26. I am the secret serpent coiled about to spring. In my coiling there is joy. If I lift up my head, I and my nuit are one. If I droop down mine head and shoot forth venom, then is rapture of the earth, and I and the earth are one.
So here we have another obvious reference to Kundalini and the rising of the serpent that's made in this line with the whole in my coiling there is joy. For me, it brings a visual of the coiled snake, which looks a bit like the 9 that we were talking about. And it feels like a reference to the earthly experience of orgasms and internal union. The lifting up of his head brings to mind the 1 and the 8, or the raising of Kundalini energy. And for me, it's a visual of the caduceus snake rising.
Because they do spiral and there's like a give and take of energy, but it's all when the Kundalini rises, it's from your loins up into your crown. And then maybe it spirals back down, but the awakening happens that way. That's the union part of it.
On the third eye is where the Uraeus serpent sits, the third eye chakra. And the Uraeus serpent is also a symbol of royalty in Egypt that we've spoken about before on the show. And it's highly relevant in this line. It's that serpent we see on Divine Neteru, like Ra and Hathor. And it's
in the crowns, right? Like the pharaoh crown with the serpent coming out of the forehead.
Yeah, and sometimes you see the serpent draped over the sun as well.
Oh, yeah.
So it's likewise has a fiery venom that protects the pharaoh. And we know that the serpent was known as the divine protector of the pharaoh and the house of God. This brings us back again to the ostrich once more. They can't, they can't build their nests in trees, right? So because they're flightless birds. So they have their eggs in holes in the ground. And the myth of the ostrich sticking its head in the ground comes from them doing this. And they do this so that they can turn their eggs to make sure that they are evenly heated. It's an act of balance.
That's fascinating too, because a lot of birds will lay their eggs. If they can't fly, they'll lay them on the ground. And that leaves you open to predators. So these guys are smart enough to put their eggs underground, and they, instead of sitting on them to turn them, they actually stick their head in the ground. So they're veiled for a certain time. And maybe people think they're turning their back or not looking at things or hiding from something. Oh, you're stupid. You think you hide your head and that the predator can't see you. It's like, no, they're protecting their offspring.
Before Hecaastra, nobody knew how much ostrich was in Book of the Law.
I don't know if I should say you're welcome or apologize.
I mean, they're damn tasty.
They are.
So Hideo Kojima got his Japanese translation of the Book of the Law not so long ago.
Oh, snap.
Yeah, and this line in particular, it's got an interesting word in there, joy. And if you play Metal Gear Solid 3, you know that during the opening mission, you find out that the boss's code name from her old unit, Cobra unit, was the Joy, and she is the mentor of Snake, Big Boss, who was then cloned, and the events of the game transpire. But I think Kojima is a Thelemite for sure.
I gotta admit, I think you guys are right. There's too much shit going on in his games.
Yeah, I could talk about more, but this is about the Book of the Law.
Dude knows what's up, though.
Somebody will burn in hell for not letting him finish Silent Hill.
I know, right?
That was a Gnostic gospel in the making. Fuck the fucking politics that made that not happen. Okay.
Oh, but the pachinko machines, Luke.
27. There is great danger in me. For who doth not understand these runes shall make a great miss. He shall fall down into the pit called Because, and there he shall perish with the dogs of reason. This be rap lyrics. If you take it literally, you're going to wreck yourself. Self-attainment is high-risk behavior. Reason is a panderer and a backstabbing traitor. Actually, Christianity agrees. Reason is a whore, the greatest enemy that faith has. It never comes to the aid of spiritual things, but more frequently than not, struggles against the divine word, treating with contempt all that emanates from God. That's Martin Luther.
Bro, but this is actually backed up by science too, because if you have to just make a quick decision, even any decision that you make, really, it turns out that your subconscious, you have a reaction to something, and then your left brain or your dominant mind, your logical side of your brain, will come up with a reason after the fact that it happened. So you don't know why you did something until after you do it. So the because, it's interesting that it's linked with reason and that these are negative things. Like, you can have an excuse for anything. You can always have an excuse. Oh, I didn't do that because blah, 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 and so did that.
Yep.
This is the sin almost, because
Well, I didn't do that.
you're blaming it on something else. You're pinning it on something else. That entire process happens within your brain, and you can convince yourself. You will be totally think that you're not in the wrong, but it happens automatically because that's how our bodies work.
But if you were being guided by love, you would know.
You would do nonsensical thing. That's why they say love is blind, or, it's nonsensical or non-logical. It's because you're following your true will. And sometimes when you're doing that, it doesn't seem like, oh, well, I probably shouldn't do that. That's not a good idea. But for some reason you're compelled to, and you take a chance. That's what following your will is.
It just reminds me a bit of the saying, you don't choose who you love.
It's very true.
Love is irrational.
Extremely. Not only can it cause pure joy and ecstasy and happiness, but it can cause pain and regret and sorrow and torture. That's why it's a dualistic emotion. if you experience true love, you're going to see both sides to that.
I mean, some of the other dangers too, I think that it's referencing is that during the process of realization of yourself as Hadit, it's possible to simply stop at the realization. And there's many people who have a Kundalini awakening and they will feel a massive surge in sexuality, but then might seem to get stuck at that stage and focus solely on the sexual aspects of divinity and in the physical expression of it through sex. And I'm not saying that sexual union isn't part of it, but both symbolically and physically, but that the raising of Kundalini doesn't just stop at your sacral chakra.
And you could become habitually addicted to this feeling and then go back for more when you should be pushing forward. You can get fixated on the stage, especially if it's extremely powerful, because you'll keep returning and trying to recreate that moment, and you'll be thwarted in your own mission to go forward with, your practice or whatever.
Yeah, it's a really easy stage to get stuck at because of that.
Yeah, and we're programmed, to enjoy that, so it makes sense. But at the same time, you can use, like we were saying, you can use an excuse to, oh, well, it worked before, so it would work again. Or I need to find somebody who's better than this last person. Like, you can get stuck in this so easily because it's just part of our human or like animal nature.
Like, all those yogis that are just like weird sex yogis?
Yeah, I think that,
yeah.
that's exactly what's going on.
Well, the commentary suggests that most people don't really experience Kundalini outside of sex, so they tend to think that's where Hadit is, Nine by the Fools.
Although it is possible outside of sexual, experience, but union is very important for that. So you probably need two people for that.
I mean, this can happen through apotheosis as well, through spiritual practices. And I think that's also an underlying danger of apotheosis. To realize yourself as God can also cast a great shadow behind you. It's kind of like staring at yourself in a mirror and having full realization it's you in the mirror, but you don't see the back of your head. You can never see the back of your head. It's only in the full integration of this concept internally and externally that we can eliminate that blind spot of the shadow behind the object.
And I think it's extremely important for people to understand this, because if you come to this realization before you're ready, oh, I'm God, God inhabits my body, then I am the internal God. Okay, you can see where this leads. You could bastardize this into somebody thinking like a sociopath thinks that nobody else has a perspective, or that God does not reside in anyone else but themselves. So there can be perversions of this realization as well, until you're ready to understand, okay, well, this other animal or person that's looking at me, or even this tree, it also has that flame inside of it. So you have to understand you're looking at yourself when you look at a tree or a cat or a person.
Well, this is why it says those who misunderstand these runes shall make a great miss. You can even die.
Or kill people.
Of course.
That's what my fine line is like, there's a fine line between union with God and the all, and this debaucherous descent into being a sociopath and harming people for no other reason that you think that you're God.
Say what you want about the individual, but Polanski's The Ninth Gate did an incredible job showing this in cartoonish matter. How religious seekers, if they start taking things literally and begin acting them out, it becomes ghoulish and frightful and crazy. If you misunderstand your religious texts or even your messages from spirit, you're liable to cause serious damage to yourself and to others. In D&D, we might say you'd lose your character sheet. That's what happens if your dungeon master sees that you've done so much evil that...
Oh, snap.
You've lost your character sheet.
Yeah, you lose humanity, as I say, or it's cognitive dissonance. You're behaving out of character. It's just a part of the stats, I guess, on your personal record.
Like I was saying with not seeing that blind spot, can't see the back of your head. It's like these are the dangers of Hadit. The closer that you get to the sun, the larger the blind spot becomes. And we can understand this visually as well when looking at the shadows cast by celestial objects obstructing light, like in a solar eclipse. It's kind of like looking at the sun and saying, I am God, and not seeing the shadows cast behind us. I think this is the folly of the fool that seeks simply to become God without the acknowledgement that all is God. I think that's part of true apotheosis. It recognizes not just the internal divinity within you, but also that which is external and universal in all that is. Every man and every woman is a star. All numbers are equal, as within, so without. There's two pillars on the tree of life, and just as you have two hands, that middle path is an ambidextrous nature. It utilizes both sides and it's working. It favors neither side. It reaches out equally to both sides.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying is differences between people, or the fact that I am me and you are an other, we are both equal. We're the same consciousness experiencing things from different perspectives. So you have to understand that part of it before you can make a meaningful union with that energy.
Line 28. Now a curse upon because and his kin.
Yeah, fuck because.
And to comment on what Heka was just saying about people kind of getting stuck at a certain point in the raising of the Kundalini energy, the sphere of Netzach on the Kabbalistic tree of life, it's right around this point called one of the veils called Parokith, and it's where you're supposed to meet your holy guardian angel or first have contact with it. And I feel like it's kind of what you were saying is that you're thinking too much in the passion and the because of things, and you're not going to get through the veil. The next one is Tifereth, which is the sun. Kind of funny that you mentioned that. But I think a lot of people, even like if they don't practice magic or Kabbalists themselves, in their own mental growth, they get stuck at this archetypical level of thinking, and they don't learn anything else but to fill their aura with the green energy of Netzach.
When I hear this line, now a curse upon because and his kin, I'm immediately reminded of the concentration camps and how the Nazis defended themselves. I was only following orders.
All the nurses that did the terrible, terrible things, and they were just following orders.
Which brings us to 29. May because be accursed forever. Crowley says, distrust any explanation whatever. Disraeli said, never ask anyone to dinner who has to be explained. All explanations are intended to cover up lies, injustices, or shames. The truth is radiantly simple. Now, during the Nazi era, so-called euthanasia programs were established for handicapped and mentally ill children and adults. Organized killings of an estimated 70,000 German citizens took place at killing centers and in psychiatric institutions. Quote, in the euthanasia programs, physicians and nurses contributed a major role in the killings. In 1939, only 9% of the nurses were members of the Nazi sisterhood. The main employment of the Nazi nurses was in community health nursing because this area could provide the greatest opportunity for influencing the population. It was not, therefore, only the Nazi nurses who were involved in the euthanasia programs. Obedience was greatly valued in Germany, and nurses were to be obedient to their senior-ranking nurses as well as to physicians. They would follow their orders without questioning them, because if they did not, they believed that they would be punished. One former nurse said, I only did my duty, and I did everything on the orders of my superiors. The director, Grabowski, always warned us of the Gestapo. He said he would inform the Gestapo if we didn't do what we were ordered. Also, some of the nurses saw the killings as an act of mercy and a release for the patients. Former nurse Louise Erdmann said, I was used to obey strictly the orders of the physicians. I was brought up and instructed to do so. I was aware of the fact that a person was killed, but I didn't see it as a murder because it was a release, Martha W. said. I didn't have enough time to think about it at the time because the nurses were put under a lot of stress. So this is the type of evil that people will do just following orders.
Seemed like a whole lot of because in there.
All the because. Crowley says, they can always prove to you that it is necessary and patriotic and all the rest of it that you should suffer intolerable wrongs. Crowley says some really dumb things. That's just not one of them.
Yeah, I agree with that on both parts of that.
Line 30. If will stops and cries why, invoking because, then will stops and does not.
Not does not, but not like nothing.
So the idea here is if you have to stop and ask why you're doing something, especially if the answer is because, probably means you're not doing your true will. Your true will is not beholden to a reason, logic, justification, excuse, or concession. Even the person following the Nike slogan is one step behind the person who didn't need one. What reasons do the birds need for singing or the sun for rising? You have no right but to do as thou wilt, even if because fails to endorse it.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful though, the Nike, because just do it. Don't ask questions. Just do it. Like justice.
Yes.
31. If power asks why, then power is weakness. This is why we say, do will, be law. All right, if we're looking for a reason to
I'll read
cancel
it.
Crowley, this is it. This is the one. Like
But-
if you want to find some dirt on the Crow, look at this comment. This is top tier reasons.
So, yeah, a little bit later in life, Crowley looks at this line, if power asks why, then is power weakness? He says, quote, "It is ridiculous to ask a dog why it barks. One must fulfill one's true nature. One must do one's will. To question this is to destroy confidence, and so to create an inhibition."
So far, so good, right? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Then what?
If a woman asks a man who wishes to kiss her why he wants to do so, and he tries to explain, he becomes impotent. His proper course is to choke her into compliance, which is what she wants anyhow.
What?
Oh, murder.
End quote.
Oh, woo.
Jesus.
No.
Shut up,
Bloody
Mari.
Christ.
Oh, no.
It's not even something to be laughing at.
So true.
This is- okay, yeah, this is like definitely one of the times when you're like, yeah, Crowley was a fucking asshole. He probably didn't escape the will of samsara, and his soul is still stuck
Yeah, but okay.
here. He's nothing.
All right. Crowley accepts and expounds upon several concepts regarding the equal nature of men and women in other commentaries that he's made, right? We know that.
Mm-hmm.
But he appears to insert absurd comments intermittently, like this last one,
Yep.
where he uses it as an opportunity to justify his own cultural biases regarding women.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah. Okay, so it seems pretty obvious to me that he couldn't fully wrap his head around certain concepts regarding women due to his own personal opinions and practices. His above commentary that was just read about choking a woman into compliance because he thinks that's what women want anyways is a pretty gravely misplaced generalization of sexes.
Yeah, but it's still fun.
No, it's not. You can't say that, Mari.
Because, okay.
No, I know.
no.
I don't literally want it, but I
All right.
I like,
We know the women's folks are equal. It's been pointed out several times. The nature of true will is also being explained by this point in the Book of the Law. Given the line regarding kings against kings and other commentaries made by Crowley, each star, male or female, has their own orbit and should not be forced into compliance for anything against their will, regardless of intellectual reasoning. That being said,
consent.
Yeah.
Consent.
Yes.
That being said, even if being choked into compliance is what some people do want, regardless of whether they're male or female, Crowley's use of this as an example is grotesque and incorrect simply because it's such a broad generalization of the sexes, and that's born of his own sexual escapades and personal views towards women.
Fair enough.
That's his comment later, not in the Book of the Law. The Book of the Law is not saying that. That's Crowley later.
Oh, I
being-
know. I
Yes.
Being an asshole. Just
I
for the
know.
listeners.
So whether Crowley wanted to admit it or not, he was subject to old patriarchal ideologies, and it does leak through in some of the more cringeworthy comments, like this one. I also think that you could relate this topic to Lilith, who was demonized for wanting to be viewed as equal and not simply a submissive object of sexual conquering. We know Lilith was demonized for the same reasoning as put forward the same generalizations of old patriarchal ideology that influenced Crowley's commentary.
Which actually kind of explains why Lilith is so popular in the post-Crowley era.
I do. She was my first goddess, patron goddess. But it's basically like, you got to take what you want or it won't be there anymore, was the lesson that I learned.
It's to each their own, right? If you want to be choked, that's totally fine. But like to generalize that as like,
No,
women
I
want
agree.
this,
No.
this is why I'm calling Crowley out on this, because it's like, no, this is fucking dumb.
Yeah, but you can see that like he's using it for his writings are obviously through his own perspective. So, I understand that part. Like I'm not a fan of the guy originally, but I can see what he was doing there is all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. There's dudes that want that stuff too.
Yeah, exactly.
That happens.
It's an individual thing.
There's a
of
reason
what they will,
Yeah.
it's their will, then that's fine.
There's a reason why people can make money for a living as a dominatrix. This is not
That's
sex
right.
specific. So using this as a generalization, that's why it's misplaced.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, it's more just bagging on reason and because that line is talking about, which brings us to line 32. Also, reason is a lie, for there is a factor infinite and unknown, and all their words are skew-wise.
Rationality or the reasoning mind It places restrictions on consciousness. Intuition comes from the infinite and unknown. It's beyond the rational mind. Reasoning is what places restriction on others, and when used as an absolute, becomes a supporting factor in attempting to force another's true will, or even that of your own. Love is fluid, it's not forced.
This reminds me of how when the colonizers, being possessed of the spiritual illness of Wetiko, were like, how much can we buy the land from you for? And the natives are like, we don't own this, and you can't either, really. So every number is infinite, there's no difference, which means that although our physical world and our physical incarnations are atomic, embedded in time, quantifiable, bound to earthly, limited resource, the force which manifests it is eternal, limitless, and unknowable by the intellect. A concrete example of this. Is it possible to quantify the love a child has for their parent, or vice versa? Is there a test to determine how much somebody loves somebody else, or a proof that can be presented? Can love be bought? Can happiness? Cast me into a dungeon, burn me at the stake, crown me king of kings. I can pursue happiness as long as my brain lives, but neither gods nor saints, wise men nor subtle drugs can ensure that I will catch it. And if you'd like to hear the rest of the show, where we finish book 2 and talk about dogs and coffee and stuff, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of $5 gets you this extended shows and all the other extended shows and the stuff we talked about in the intro. Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.